Hello, Nancy No Havoc Johnston, Mediums for Trump here. This week we're going to talk about the deep state and how it's real. Uh, you know, the recent findings from DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, and Kash Patel on the Russia hoax documents implicating President Obama, Biden, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, James Clapper, the CIA, the FBI, on the attempted coup against Donald Trump, and how the Russia hoax was just that, a hoax. It was all fabricated, suggests that the deep state does exist. Yet there are those who still say, oh, no, 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 and they're still defending these people. So I'm just going to share a little bit about my life and my father's life. I've given you a little bit of history on my mother, and but I haven't detailed my father because this one's going to be a little bit longer. So my father was a prisoner of war, as you know, in Nazi Germany. He was going to engineering school, and they plucked him out of that. They needed workers. His brother was killed in Auschwitz, a young man helping Jews escape. We're Catholic. My father was Catholic. And my father was released, and he met my mother in Beirut, Germany. They were young. They married. They had my brother. He's 14 years older than I am, and in Germany. And they awaited 3 years to come to the U.S. They declined Australia, Canada, and finally someone sponsored them from the U.S. And you had to work it for a year for free. And so my father did. They were dirt poor, living on the Upper East Side in little Slovakia. I think it's the Upper East Side in the 70s. And then my father began building. He was an engineer in the 50s. In success working for people. He built some investment homes in Paterson, New Jersey, when Paterson was nice. I mean, parts of Paterson are beautiful, historic, beautiful homes, beautiful waterfalls. But he had some income properties there. And in 1961 or 2, he purchased anywhere between 31 and 50 acres in Tony Franklin Lakes, which is where I grew up, Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. So when he purchased the property, he had submitted plans for a development of, I think, anywhere between 21 and 27 homes. It was accepted, approved, and he had streets named. It was all along Pullis Avenue. We lived in 3 different homes along Pullis Avenue, and his homes were beautiful. They were showstoppers. So he had started building and selling, and somewhere down the line, someone didn't want him to develop the property in Franklin Lakes, someone downstream. Now, downstream, there was a little creek going through his property, and there was a little pond. And someone, the person who lived downstream decided he didn't want the property to be developed. So at some point, he had someone come in and raise this small dam, which backed up the water and created a lake and flooding, and the trees that my father had planted, hundreds of trees, all dead. The flora and fauna all gone. So and then when you build a home near a body of water, you have a certain setback. So people started suing him. And he then sued the state of New Jersey. He sued the town of Franklin Lakes. He sued, I think it finally went to D.C. It got to D.C. through our local senator, but I'll get there. So my father had engineering companies, experts in water supply and land development. He had photos, before and after photos of the dam before and after. He proved that there were, I think it was 4 feet that was added to the dam to eventually not only, back up the water on my father's property, but this person got had a waterfall now on his property, which was, nice. However, my father fought these people for years. There are two articles in the New York Times in 1972, May, and then you can look it up. They're still it's documented, highlighting the details of my father's quest. Now, my father went to Trenton. Most of his, they toyed with him, the deep state. They would lose his documents. They said, he didn't have the proper affidavits. He went for a hearing. They knew the stress he was under. They knew that he was going bankrupt. They continued just to stonewall, stonewall, stonewall. My father alleged that they changed the maps in New Jersey. They lost the older maps with a lower dam, and the newer plans had the higher dam. My father, he just never stopped. It ended up ruining him because in I believe it was 1975, I was coming home from school. I literally got off the school bus, and I think I was a sophomore in high school. And I noticed moving vans in our driveway, and I was like, what's going on? And unbeknownst to me, I was at school. My mother was home. Someone had called my father to court, saying that they were finally going to hear the case. So my father went down to Trenton, and there was no hearing. And so they got my father out of the house, but there were men with guns, sheriffs, men in black suits. And my mother tried to barricade the door, and they pushed the door down, and they literally threw us out of our house. So fortunately for me, I went to live with my best friend, Jane, whose family were Christians, and they took me in. The whole family split apart. I mean, it was destroyed after that. My mother was in shock. I remember looking at her. I just couldn't believe I'd never seen her like that. And we'd been through some tough times. So all of this, my father just kept saying, what are you doing? I want her to come to America. They don't do this in America, but yes, they do. This was in 1975 when this happened. Now, only 10 years prior, they had killed JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, and, people were starting to talk about the deep state. My mother always believed that Lee Harvey Oswald was a pawn. So when we lost everything, that's it. The family split apart. Probably a year before that, and I'm talking about the deep state now, I remember my father coming to, he was at the kitchen table, but let me just, I skipped over one part. My father had gotten to know a senator, Harrison Williams, in New Jersey. And I remember he went to cocktail parties at his house, or maybe he was invited to one, I don't know. Or maybe, he barged in, I'm not certain. But Harrison Williams knew of my father's case. In fact, within his papers, my father's case are in the Harrison Williams papers that are archived somewhere in New Jersey or DC. But getting back to a year before we were evicted from our house, and it was total and complete implosion of our family. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and my father came in and said that two men in black suits came to the house, and he had been gone for a few days. And that was not unusual because he was often in DC, trying to meet with different senators and different departments, trying to plead our case. And so he said that two men had taken him to Minnesota. And what they did was they flew him out to Minnesota, and this is in 1974 and 1975. And we were evicted in the fall of 75. That I remember, because I had a fall coat on. So these men took him to Minnesota, and they took him to Hubert Humphrey's house, where he met with Hubert Humphrey, and Hubert Humphrey told him that he was dying of cancer, and that he was going to help my father. He had heard my father's case, and he wanted my father to forget everything that had happened. Now, mind you, this is before they came to our house and they completely destroyed our family. So they told my father that he was going to be given this huge development in the Middle East, and I think it was Iran. And my father was going to be in charge of it, and he was going to have plenty of money, and the family would be fine. And there was a long story about that. They took him to the Mall of America. My father was impressed. They were wining and dining him. So after my father finished, my mother said, they're going to Lee Harvey Oswald you. And my father said, yeah, they are. And so my father said no. And it was then that they destroyed us. So I'm sharing this story because I've shared it in, one-on-one conversations, but I'm sharing it here, so my 33 followers will see it. But it's important because this is why I'm so pro-Trump. He's shedding light on the deep state, on the thugs, on the goons, on the gulags that exist and have existed and have been running the world for years, for 75 years, since the 1960s, 50s, when it all began. Now, the one thing I want to point out is the Middle Eastern connection. Years later, Senator Harrison Williams was indicted for abscam, which had to do with oil, Middle Eastern oil. I don't know the details there. He was impeached, and they were going to expel him, but he resigned, not wanting to bring dishonor to the institution that he served and so loved. He maintained until he died that he was framed. Now, are these two connected? These two men coming to my father's house and offering them, something going on in the Middle East, and then Senator Harrison Williams, getting entrapped in this abscam thing? I don't know. My father's papers, I was looking up online, my father's papers, let me just, are archived at Seton Hall in the Monsignor No Field Archive Special Collections at Seton Hall University. And a record titled Piracy Journal, Re Myro Nohavec versus the State of New Jersey, and it's dated 1980. It's archived in the Peter Rodino Jr. Papers at Seton Hall University Law Library. The document likely relates to the ongoing and legal proceedings from the 1972 dispute, or a continuation of related issues. The significance, as it says here, is the inclusion in Rodino's papers indicates that Nohavec's case may have had political or legislative implications, possibly involving federal or congressional oversight. So do I believe that my father was railroaded? Yeah, I do. He did. He never wavered. Never wavered. In fact, it drove him crazy. He couldn't believe that the country that he fled, the countries that he knew where the brown shirts and the Gestapo and the goons existed in the U.S. So that is why I'm so pro-Trump. And I am praying that someone goes to jail and they start arresting people. And the deep state does exist. Believe it. It happens. And if Harrison Williams is, or his family sees this, and they can look up my father's archives, they know their story, I know mine. That is it. Mediums for Trump. God bless.